What would you do if your own family seemed happier the moment you closed your eyes and stopped existing for the night? How far would you go to find out why your wife keeps handing you pills with a smile, while your son waits by the bedroom door like a guard? This is how one evening of pretending to sleep showed me the truth about my own house, and how that truth became the calm, legal way I protected what little life I had left. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. My name is Mark, and for most of my life, I thought I understood my own home. I am 59, an electrician who now works fewer hours than before, a man who likes quiet evenings, simple food, and the feeling of paying every bill on time. I used to believe that if you worked hard, stayed faithful, and kept a roof over your family's head, they would feel safe with you and grateful for you. Only later did I learn that sometimes people see your calm as weakness, your tiredness as an opportunity, and your trust as a door they can quietly close behind you. Most evenings looked the same from the outside. I would come home from a job with dust on my clothes and the faint smell of metal on my skin. Our small apartment always smelled like something warm, soup, or fried onions, or fresh bread. My wife, Nadia, liked to make the place feel cozy, and I tried to see that first, before anything else. My son Leo usually sat in the living room with his laptop open, talking to someone through his headphones or scrolling quickly through pages I did not recognize. The television would be on some show I did not follow, voices filling the room before I even took off my shoes. We would eat together when their schedules allowed it. I would set the table, out of habit, placing plates in the same spots we had used for years. Nadia would bring the food, often complaining about how expensive everything had become, and how impossible it was to save for anything big. Leo would complain too, but his words were sharper. He said our city was a trap, that without starting something bigger he would never get out of this small life. I listened and nodded, trying to offer ideas when I could, but he often waved my suggestions away as old thinking. After dinner, I washed the dishes while Nadia wiped the table and Leo drifted back to the couch. Sometimes Nadia stood next to me and talked quietly about money. She said the electricity bill had gone up again, that groceries cost more every week, that my small pension and part-time work were not enough for the future. She said we needed to be clever, to use what we had before it ran out. When she said what we had, she always meant what I had, but she did not say it like that. She said it like everything was naturally shared and naturally directed by her and our son. About a year ago, after some months of broken sleep and late phone calls from work, I spoke to our doctor about my insomnia. He gave me a prescription for a light sleeping pill and told me to use it only when my mind would not slow down. At first, I took them only once or twice a week when my thoughts kept circling around unpaid invoices or Leo's future. The pills dulled the sharp edges of my worry and gave me a full night of rest I had not felt in a long time. Nadia was pleased. She said I looked younger when I slept well, less grumpy in the mornings. Over time, she began to treat the pill as part of our routine. After we finished washing dishes and talking about bills, she would place a small glass of water on my bedside table and shake the pill out of its box with a practiced gesture. She did it with a smile, like a loving nurse. She always watched until I put it on my tongue and swallowed. At first I found this sweet, a sign of care. Later, it began to feel like a ritual that belonged more to her than to me. Leo also started to notice the pattern and joke about it. On nights when I looked especially tired, he would say things like that it was time to sedate the old bear, so the rest of them could relax. He laughed when he said it, and so did Nadia, and I forced myself to laugh too. I told myself it was just dark humor, that young people talked like that these days. But even jokes leave marks when you hear them often enough. Something else began to bother me, slowly at first. Once I took the pill and lay down, I felt the world soften around me. The television sounds faded. The room blurred. My body became heavy, and my thoughts turned thick and slow. That part I expected. What I did not expect was the feeling that the energy in the apartment changed the moment my eyes were closed. It was like the house took a deeper breath when I stopped moving. Many nights, just before sleep pulled me under, I heard Nadia and Leo talking more freely in the living room. The television volume would drop, and their voices would slide into a lower register. I could not always understand the words, but I heard my name more than I liked. Sometimes there was sudden laughter after my name, the kind you share when you think the person you are talking about will never hear it. Once or twice, I tried to get up and walk to the door, but the pill held my limbs like sandbags. By the time I sat up, the voices had moved on. The moment passed. One Saturday, Nadia's younger sister, Irina, came over for coffee. She is loud where Nadia is quiet, the kind of person who repeats every thought twice just to hear it again. We sat in the living room with small cups and a plate of dry cookies. The television played softly in the background. Irina asked how I was feeling and whether I was still addicted to the magic sleeping candy. She said this in a joking tone, but there was something sharp underneath. Nadia laughed and said I was good these days because I went to bed early and slept through anything. She said it made things easier for everyone, because they did not have to worry about me pacing and checking the door 3 times at night like I used to. Irina said that at least they had found a way to turn me off like a television when I became too anxious. Both women laughed. Leo, from the couch, added that if they ever lost the pills, they would need a tranquilizer dart for me instead. I smiled because everyone was looking at me, but inside I felt something small crack. Later that day, while the women were in the kitchen, I walked past the partly closed door and heard Irina say that I was like a big sleepy wallet who made noise unless you pressed the off button. Nadia did not correct her. She only said that as long as I kept paying the mortgage and the bills, they could handle the rest. She mentioned that it was useful that I now slept so heavily because there were things that were easier to handle when my eyes were closed. I stood there in the hallway, my hand on the frame, and felt my chest tighten. That night, when Nadia handed me the pill with the same gentle gesture, I looked at it differently. A part of me wanted to refuse it, to say I did not need it, and to stay awake just to prove a point. Another part of me was honestly tired and afraid of another night of restless thoughts and half sleep. I put the pill on my tongue under Nadia's watchful eyes and swallowed with water. But this time I paid close attention to the taste and the weight of it. I wondered, for the first time, if the dose was exactly what the doctor had prescribed or if something had quietly changed. Once I lay down, I tried to stay awake longer, forcing my eyelids open, listening to every sound in the apartment. I heard Nadia doing dishes, Leo moving around the living room. I caught fragments of their conversation, talk about money, about opportunities, about someone who might help them if we can show we control everything. I could not grasp the full meaning, because the pill dragged me away like a slow, heavy wave. The last thing I felt before sleep took me was the strange knowledge that my own bed no longer felt entirely safe. In the morning, I woke up with that same heaviness pressing down on my limbs and a dull ache behind my eyes. Nadia was already in the kitchen, making coffee. Leo sat at the table, scrolling on his phone. They greeted me cheerfully, almost too cheerfully, asking if I had slept well, commenting on how quiet I had been. I sat down, took my mug, and tried to shake off the fog in my head. When I asked casually what they had watched on television the night before, neither of them answered directly. Nadia said something about a boring show. Leo said he did not remember, that everything on television was the same. I wanted to believe them. I wanted to believe that my unease was just the result of age, pills, and too many dark thoughts. But as I watched them move around the kitchen, finishing each other's sentences, exchanging quick looks I could not interpret, I felt a thin line of cold settle at the base of my spine. That feeling grew even sharper a few days later when I walked past the kitchen again and heard Nadia on the phone with Irina, saying in a low voice that I slept through anything now, and that life in the apartment had become much easier once his eyes finally stay closed at night. In the days after I heard Nadia tell her sister that life was easier when my eyes stayed closed, something in my head would not turn off, even during the day. I still went to work, still fixed wiring in dark stairwells and noisy shops, still smiled at customers who thanked me for small repairs. But my mind was often back in our kitchen, replaying her words. I kept asking myself if I was overreacting, if stress and age were making me paranoid, or if I had finally started seeing what had been in front of me for a long time. To understand how much this bothered me, you have to know where we started. I did not grow up with much. My parents worked simple jobs, and nothing was ever handed to us twice. When Leo was born from my first marriage, I promised him he would never feel the kind of insecurity I had felt as a child. After the divorce, I took extra work whenever I could. I climbed scaffolding in winter storms, fixed short circuits in basements that smelled like mold, and took night calls from panicked customers whose lights had gone out. My body was tired, but I felt strong inside, because every bill I paid and every pair of shoes I bought for my son felt like proof that I was useful. I met Nadia later, when Leo was already a teenager. She was working at a small beauty salon on the other side of town. She was different from me, brighter on the outside, always dressed nicely even when she had little money. She liked to imagine better things. She said often that life did not have to be gray. I liked her laugh and the way she could talk to anyone. She liked that I was steady, that I turned up when I said I would, and that I never played games with money. At least, that is what she said back then. When we moved in together, the apartment was small and the furniture secondhand, but we made it ours. I took extra jobs to fix the walls and the wiring. She found cheap curtains and made them look like something from a magazine. Leo moved between us and his mother for a while. then finally came to live with us full-time when things got hard on the other side. I was proud to give him his own room, even if it was just a narrow space with a small window. I bought him a desk so he could study, telling myself that this time he would not have to work with his hands unless he wanted to. Years later, when Leo started talking about business ideas, I was the one who supported him. He said he wanted to start an online shop, then a small marketing agency, then something with crypto that I never fully understood. Each time, he came to me with numbers on his phone, showing me how quickly things could grow if we just got past the first stage. Each time, he needed a little help to reach that stage. I took some money from my savings, thinking it was an investment in his future. When things did not work out, he always had an explanation. Wrong partners, bad timing, market changes. I told myself failure was part of learning. By the time he was 27, the pattern was clear to everyone except me. He moved back home again for a few months between plans, and those months stretched. The rent and the food came from my account. The internet, which he said he needed for projects, came from my account too. Nadia started to complain that we were stuck, that other people her age were going on trips and posting nice photos, while we sat at the same table with the same chipped cups. She said we had to use what life had given us before it dried up, and every time she said what life had given us, her eyes drifted toward me. When my knees began to hurt and my back started sending small sharp signals at night, I cut my work hours. I did not want to risk a serious injury that would end everything in one fall. My pension payments started, not huge, but steady. I thought this would be a period of rest, maybe some small projects at home, maybe cheap trips to the countryside with Nadia. Instead, it became the precise moment when she and Leo began to look at me differently, like a faucet that might stop running if they did not twist it hard enough in time. The sleeping pills entered our life around then, too. I had trouble resting because I worried. I worried about Leo's direction, about the way Nadia sighed when she looked at our bank statements, about the rising prices on every shelf. I told all this to Dr. Pavel during a visit. He listened, checked my heart, asked some questions, and then wrote a small prescription. He said the medication was mild, that I should use it only when needed, that the goal was to break the cycle of bad nights so my own sleep could reset. I believed him. For a while, it seemed fine. But like many things, what started as occasional became normal. It was easier for everyone when I took the pill because I stopped pacing, stopped getting up at 3 a.m. to check if the door was locked or if I had paid that last bill. Nadia liked the quiet. She began to ask each night, like a habit, whether I had taken my medicine. At first, it was a question. Over time, it became more of an instruction. She would place the pill by my hand, draw my fingers around it, and wait. There was care in her eyes, but there was also something else I could not name then. The night I overheard her telling Irina that I was like a big sleepy wallet, something finally clicked. I realized that my sleep was not just a comfort for them. It was a condition they preferred, maybe even needed, for reasons I did not yet fully understand. I went to work the next day with that phrase bouncing around in my head. At lunch, my old friend and neighbor Karim called and asked if I wanted to come by after work for tea. I said yes without thinking, simply because I needed to talk to someone who saw me as more than a bank account with legs. Karim lives one building over, on the 4th floor. His balcony faces the same tired courtyard as ours. He used to work as an accountant and now spends his days reading newspapers and giving small advice to people who come to him with money questions. When I arrived, he poured tea into 2 glasses and asked the usual things: how my knees were, whether the work was manageable, how Leo was doing. I tried to answer in the usual way, with half jokes, but my words came out heavy. Eventually, I told him about the pills, the jokes, the way Nadia talked about me when she thought I could not hear. He listened quietly, only interrupting to ask small, clarifying questions. When I mentioned that I slept so deeply now that I did not wake up even if someone dropped something, he raised his eyebrows. He asked if I had checked whether the dosage had changed. I said no, I trusted the doctor. He asked if I had spoken to the doctor since the first prescription. I realized I had not. He asked if I had looked at my bank statements lately. I said I checked them sometimes, but I did not remember every detail. He suggested gently that it might be time to look carefully, line by line. Not because he believed something terrible was happening, but because numbers do not lie and because trust does not mean closing your eyes. On the way home, his words followed me like a shadow. At our apartment, the usual smells of cooking met me at the door. Nadia was stirring a pot. Leo was at the table with his laptop again. Everything looked normal. But instead of sitting down and letting the evening follow its old path, I went straight to the small corner of the living room where we kept our documents and my old laptop. I told Nadia I needed to check something for work. She did not question it. I sat at the desk, turned on the computer, and logged into my online banking. The familiar blue and white screen appeared. For a moment, I felt foolish, like an old man chasing ghost stories. Then I looked at the list of recent activity more closely: small transfers, card payments at odd hours, app logins past midnight. Some amounts were tiny, some bigger, but what caught my eye was the timestamps. Many of them were marked between 11 at night and 1 in the morning, exactly when I knew I was usually in bed, sinking under the weight of the pill. My first thought was that maybe I had used the app before bed and simply forgotten. I scrolled further back. The same pattern appeared on several nights each week. I tried to remember any evening when I had felt awake enough to handle money at those hours. Nothing came. My heart began to beat faster. I clicked on the details of one random transfer. It showed internal transfer to savings of Leo M. Another showed a payment to a service Leo had once mentioned, some platform for one of his old projects. Another showed a simple cash withdrawal at a nearby ATM. I sat there in the half-light of the living room, cursor hovering over those entries, feeling like I was looking at someone else's life. My name was on the account. My money was in the balances. But the movement did not feel like mine. Behind me, I heard chairs move and dishes clink. Nadia asked if I wanted more soup. I said I would come in a minute. My voice sounded wrong, even to my own ears. Later that evening, I tried to bring it up calmly. I asked Leo if he had ever used my phone late at night, maybe to call someone after his own battery died. He shrugged and said he did not remember. He said that if he needed to, he might have, since we were family. He used that word, family, like a universal key. I asked Nadia if she had noticed any changes in our accounts. She said I worried too much, and that the important thing was that we still paid the main bills. Then she placed the pill next to my glass, just as always, and told me to sleep, because worrying never fixed anything. I took the pill because I was not ready yet for a direct fight, and because, if I am honest, I was scared of what a long, wakeful night might show me. But as I swallowed, my decision was already forming. The next time I went to the clinic, I would speak to Dr. Pavel directly about the dosage. And before that, on one special night, I would find a way to keep my mind clear while letting everyone else think I was as deeply asleep as ever. That half-plan settled inside me like a small stone. It did not feel like revenge. It felt like self-defense. For the first time, I was not just drifting along with the rhythm of pills and jokes and heavy sleep. I was watching, counting, preparing. And when, a few days later, my phone buzzed on the table with another late-night bank alert at the exact moment I saw Leo's phone light up in his hand with the same sound, the last piece of doubt slipped quietly out of my chest. The next time I sat in front of Dr. Pavel, the clinic felt different to me, even though nothing had changed. The walls were still the same pale color, the same posters about blood pressure and diabetes hung in the same crooked positions, and the same faint smell of antiseptic floated in the air. But now I was not just a tired man asking for help with sleep. I was a man who had started to wonder what exactly was happening to him after he closed his eyes. He checked my blood pressure and listened to my chest with his cold stethoscope, the way he always did. Then he asked how I was sleeping. I told him that, on paper, I was sleeping well, maybe too well. I said that lately, once I took the pill, I dropped as if someone had cut a string, with almost no memory of the hours after. I said I woke up heavy, with a thick fog in my head. He frowned and looked at his notes. He asked if I had increased the dosage. I said no. I said I had only ever used what he had written originally. He turned the screen toward himself and checked the prescription history. Then he looked back at me and said that he had not changed anything since the first time. Same dose, same instructions, no repeats without seeing me. He asked if any other doctor had adjusted it. I said not that I knew. He asked if anyone at home could have touched the box or mixed the pills with anything else. I felt my stomach tighten at that question, but I kept my face calm. I told him that Nadia usually gave me the pill and water, that she cared about my sleep. He did not accuse her of anything. He simply said that medication should stay as he prescribed it, and that if I felt too sedated, we should reduce the dose or stop for a while. He suggested I take a break from the pills for a week to see how my body reacted. He wrote a note saying that, in his opinion, I was perfectly capable of making decisions and that my complaints were about fatigue, not confusion. He said it was more for his file than for me. Still, when he handed me that piece of paper, I folded it carefully and slipped it into my wallet. It felt like something I might need one day, even if I did not yet know how. Leaving the clinic, I did not go straight home. I walked slowly through the small shopping street nearby, past the fruit stands and the bakery, until I reached a cramped electronics store. Inside, light bounced off glass screens and plastic wrappers. A young man behind the counter greeted me with the tired politeness you give older customers. I told him I needed a stand for my phone, something simple that would hold it upright next to my bed so I could watch videos without hurting my neck. He showed me a few options. I chose one that looked like nothing special, just a small black holder with a charging cable. As I paid, I thought how strange it felt to buy a tool to watch my own life. At home, I told Nadia that the doctor had suggested I cut back on the pills. I said he was worried they might be too strong for regular use. She did not look pleased. She said the pills helped me, that I was calmer and more reasonable when I slept properly. She added that I had been less difficult about small issues lately. I pointed out that I still had some trouble waking fully, that my head felt heavy, and that the doctor thought we should be careful. She said doctors always worried too much, and that I was imagining the heaviness. Then, almost as if she could not help herself, she said that without the pills, I would go back to pacing and muttering at night, and that nobody wanted that. Leo joined the conversation from the doorway, leaning against the frame. He said he agreed with his mother that when I slept, everyone slept, and that I made the atmosphere nicer when I was rested. He added that sometimes older people did not see when they were becoming a problem, which was why medicine existed. He said this lightly, like a joke, but his eyes did not look playful. I told them we would see. I did not argue more. On the outside, I stayed calm. On the inside, my decision hardened. That evening, while Nadia cooked and Leo watched something online, I sat at the small desk in the corner and unpacked the phone stand. I connected it to the charger and placed my phone on it. The screen lit up, reflecting a small patch of the room. I opened the camera app and switched to video, just to see what the angle showed. From that position on the bedside table, the camera could see the bedroom door, part of the hallway beyond it, and a slice of the living room when the door was open. The sound seemed clear enough. I watched myself through the screen as I walked to the door and back, then deleted the short test recording. I knew one phone video would not solve everything, but I also knew that my feelings alone would not protect me. People can argue with memories. They can say you misheard a joke, misunderstood a tone, exaggerated something said late at night. They have a much harder time arguing with their own faces and voices on a screen. I was not planning to use anything in court at that point. I just needed the truth, clean and undeniable, for myself first. The first time I pretended to take the pill, my hands shook slightly. I practiced earlier in the bathroom without them watching. I put a small crumb of bread on my tongue, took a sip of water, and taught myself how to keep the crumb in place, then push it to my cheek and spit it out quietly later. It felt ridiculous, like some cheap trick. But I knew that when the real moment came, their eyes would be sharp. They would watch my throat and my face. I needed to be ready. After dinner that night, Nadia moved through the kitchen quickly, as if she had a schedule only she could see. I heard the clink of the pill box opening before I even sat on the edge of the bed. She came in with a small white tablet resting in her palm and a glass of water. She said I looked more tired than usual, and that I should not fight the medicine if it helped me. Leo stood in the doorway again, arms crossed, pretending to joke about bedtime for the old bear. I took the pill between my fingers, put it on my tongue, and raised the glass. The world seemed to narrow to that moment, to the question of whether they would notice anything. I swallowed the water in one slow movement, pressing the pill gently against my upper gum with my tongue instead of letting it slide down. I forced myself to sigh and close my eyes, giving them the performance they expected. I handed back the glass with what I hoped looked like a sleepy smile. Nadia relaxed a little. Leo nodded, as if a box had been ticked on an invisible list. They left the room, turning off the main light and closing the door almost all the way. In the dark, I moved carefully to the bathroom, spat the pill into a folded tissue, and flushed it. My heart was beating fast, louder than the water in the pipes. I washed my face with cold water to sharpen my senses, then went back to the bedroom on bare feet. The apartment was quiet. I set my phone on the stand, opened the video app, checked that the tiny red dot in the corner appeared, and aimed the camera at the door. Only then did I lie down again, pulling the blanket up and arranging my body in the heavy, relaxed pose I knew they associated with the pill. I slowed my breathing and closed my eyes almost completely, leaving only a thin line to see the shapes of light and shadow. I heard soft steps in the hallway, the bedroom door opening a little more, someone standing close. Nadia's shampoo smell reached me. A hand hovered near my face. I forced myself not to move. I heard Nadia say in a low voice that I was already gone. I heard Leo answer that he always goes under fast now, and that tonight would be easy. The door opened wider. Light from the living room edged across the floor. Then their shapes moved away again. From the bed, I could not see everything, but I heard drawers in the living room, the fridge door opening, hush talk. At one point, I caught my own name and the word transfer in the same sentence, but the rest was a blur of sounds. The temptation to get up, to rush out and catch them in the act, burned in my chest like fire. But I knew that if I did, I would lose the one thing I needed most, the proof that this was not just in my head. So I lay there, Muscles tight, breath slow, the red recording dot glowing softly on the phone at my side. Hours passed in a strange half-sleep. Without the pill, my body stayed more alert. I dozed and woke in waves, listening to the apartment settle. At some point, the light under the door disappeared. I heard Nadia's slower steps, the bathroom fan, the creak of our bed as she lay down beside me. She smelled of toothpaste and something metallic, maybe coins. Leo's door clicked shut down the hall. The building grew quiet, the distant sounds of other apartments fading into a general hum. Before dawn, while the sky outside was still dark and the birds had not yet started their strange early songs, I opened my eyes fully. My head felt clearer than it had in weeks after a medicated night. My mouth was dry, but my thoughts were sharp. I reached for the phone slowly, silenced the recording, and checked the time. The video counter showed hours, not minutes. I did not watch it then. Nadia lay beside me, breathing evenly. If she woke and saw the light of the screen, all my care would be wasted. I slipped the phone under my pillow, closed my eyes again, and waited for morning, like a man hiding in his own bed. When the alarm finally rang, I moved through our usual routine as if nothing had changed. I stretched, complained lightly about my back, thanked Nadia for another good night's sleep, and drank my coffee. Leo shuffled into the kitchen late, yawning, talking about a message he had gotten after midnight. They both seemed relaxed, maybe even more relaxed than before, as if some silent deadline had passed. All the while, I felt the weight of the phone in my pocket like a stone. I knew that, inside it, another version of the night existed now, one that did not match the story we all pretended to live. I did not dare open the video while they were in the apartment, so I waited. I waited through breakfast, through Leo's complaints about the internet speed, through Nadia's list of things we needed to buy. I waited until the door closed behind them and the apartment finally emptied, leaving only the ticking of the kitchen clock and the faint hum of the refrigerator. Then I walked back to the bedroom, closed the door, and sat on the edge of the bed. My fingers felt stiff as I unlocked the phone and opened the gallery. The thumbnail of the long video sat there, a thin strip of stillness waiting to break open. I took a slow breath, feeling my heart beat against my ribs. Whatever was on that recording would not be easy to see or hear, but it would be true. And once I saw it, I knew there would be no way back to the kind of sleep I had known before. I pressed my thumb to the screen and hovered over the play icon, knowing that with one small touch, the night would start talking. I pressed play, and for a second nothing happened, just a still image of my dark bedroom door. I heard my own breathing on the recording, slow and heavy, and it felt strange to listen to my body from the outside. Then the picture shifted slightly as the door opened wider. Light from the living room spilled into the frame, yellow and soft, and I saw Nadia's silhouette appear first. She leaned over the bed, close to my face. On the video I looked completely gone, eyes closed, mouth relaxed, lying in the same position I had trained myself to hold. Watching myself like that felt like seeing a stranger, some other tired man who did not know what was about to happen next. Nadia's hand hovered over my chest and then near my mouth, like she was checking my breathing. I heard her whisper that I was already under, that the pill worked fast, that tonight would be easy. Her words were not sharp, not angry. They were practical, like someone talking about a finished task. Behind her, Leo appeared at the edge of the frame. He looked down at me the way you look at a machine you are about to use. He said quietly that I always dropped quickly now, that they did not have to wait long anymore. Then he moved closer to the side of the bed that the camera could not fully see. There was a small pause, then my own arm appeared in the lower part of the screen, limp, hand hanging over the edge of the mattress. I watched Leo lift it, angle it toward himself, and heard the little click of my phone case opening. On the recording, the camera caught only the side angle of them both bending over my hand. I heard Leo say that he had to get the fingerprint right and then a faint unlocking sound from the phone. On the screen in my hand, watching that moment again, I felt my stomach twist. That hand was mine. That phone was mine. But in the recording, they used both as if they belonged to them. They left the room, and the camera saw mostly light and shadows through the open door. For a few seconds, there was only the sound of their steps and the murmur of the television being turned down in the living room. I tapped the volume up on my phone so I could catch every word. Nadia asked if he was sure I would not wake up. Leo said that even if I did, he would tell me it was just some notification. Then I heard the sound of the banking app opening, the familiar chime I had heard so many times before when I checked my balance in the daytime. Leo read out numbers that I knew too well. He mentioned my main account, my savings account, the small separate one I used for work tools. He complained that the money was just sitting there, that it was ridiculous to leave it resting when we could use it to finally get ahead. Nadia agreed, her voice low but firm. She said that I would never do anything bold with it, that I would sit on it until I died, and that then the state or some distant relative would take more than they should. She used the word useless about my caution. She said that sometimes you have to protect a person from their own fear. Then came the part that made my hands shake. Leo talked about a bigger apartment he had seen online, one with a better kitchen and a small office room he could use for projects. He said that if they had a deposit ready, a friend could help them get a favorable agreement. Nadia said they could cover the deposit and first months easily if they restructured my accounts and later the house. She said she was sure they could convince me to sign something if they framed it as simplifying things and ensuring my comfort. Listening to this, I paused the video and just sat for a moment, staring at the still image of my dark hallway. I forced myself to press play again. Leo suggested they start with small moves to see if the bank reacted. I heard him transfer an amount and describe it out loud, as if teaching himself. He said that if I ever noticed, they would say it was to pay some urgent bill. Nadia told him that I never questioned big payments anyway, that I always assumed she had checked everything. She laughed softly and said that I trusted them more than I trusted my own eyes. The laugh hurt more than any insult. After dealing with the app, they moved back toward the bedroom. The camera caught only their shadows now. Nadia opened the drawer of my bedside table and took out the small pouch where I kept cash for emergencies. She counted the notes under her breath. Leo joked that I still lived like it was the 90s, keeping paper money just in case. She replied that it was good for them because cash was harder to trace, especially if he does not even remember how much he put in there last time. She took some bills and left a few behind, saying that I should not feel the difference too quickly. Then they walked to the small desk area just outside the bedroom, where I kept our paper statements and older documents. The camera could not see inside the drawers, but the microphone picked up the sound of folders sliding, plastic sleeves rustling. Leo said he had found the house deed copy and some pension letters. He mentioned that once I was properly retired in my head, they could present me with a simple agreement to keep things in order, moving the house into a joint ownership structure where his name would sit first. Nadia said that if I resisted, they could always tell the doctor that I was getting confused, that I misplaced things, that I repeated questions. She said some doctors were careful with reports, but others wrote what families needed them to write. Listening to my wife talk about my mind like that, not as something she cherished, but as a tool she could shape, made my throat burn. I wanted to stop the video there, to delete it and pretend I had never heard these words. Instead, I rewound that section and watched it again, this time paying attention not only to the sentences, but also to the exact phrases they used. I noticed how they planned to describe me: forgetful, anxious, unable to handle numbers, easily stressed. They were slowly building a story about me that would justify any paper they put in front of others. At one point, Nadia's voice dropped even lower. She said that if things went well with the new place and Leo's next project, we could eventually move him somewhere quieter, meaning me, maybe a small studio or a village rental where, as she put it, he can take his walks and we can visit on weekends. Leo agreed, saying it would be good for my nerves and fantastic for their freedom. He talked about turning my current bedroom into a workspace or renting out the apartment and using the money for themselves. They spoke as if I was already half gone, as if my future presence in their lives was just one more budget line to be minimized. They also discussed my visits to the doctor. Nadia said she had already told Irina that I was becoming more rigid and obsessive, planting seeds in case anyone asked later. Leo said he could handle the technical parts with online forms and bank contacts, but for official things like house documents, they might need me to sign something. Nadia replied that they would choose their moment carefully, maybe after one of my pill-heavy nights when I was slow and grateful to them. She said that if they framed papers as safety measures, for example, to make sure Nadia could act if something happened to me, I would probably sign. If not, they could talk to a lawyer friend of someone at her salon who had dealt with stubborn parents before. As they spoke, I noticed small details that would matter later. The exact time on the microwave clock behind them. The notification sounds from Leo's phone when a transfer went through. Nadia reading out an amount to confirm. Repeating part of my full name when checking a form. I paused the video several times to take screenshots, even though I did not yet fully know what I would do with them. I only knew that this was not something I could confront them about with empty hands. The recording continued with more small insults disguised as concern. They talked about how my old ideas about saving had kept us from living, how I had wasted years paying everything on time instead of taking risks. They complained that their friends had trips, cars, photos from beaches, while we had just a safe home and no drama. Leo said he felt like he was locked in a museum of my careful life. Nadia replied that once this phase was over, things would finally open up, as long as I did not suddenly change and start checking every detail like before. Eventually, the video showed them returning to the bedroom. Nadia leaned over my recorded body again, tucking the blanket around me and brushing my hair back from my forehead. To someone who did not know the context, the gesture would look tender, even loving. But after everything I had heard, it felt like the way you cover an object you have already decided to move. Leo stood at the door, glancing back once at my motionless form before switching off the hallway light. The room went dark on the screen, leaving only the faint sound of my breathing and the house settling. When the video finally ended, the phone returned to the still image of my bedroom list, now small in the gallery. My hands were stiff around the device. My mouth felt dry. I sat there for a long time without moving, listening to the ticking of the kitchen clock through the wall. The apartment around me was the same table, the same chairs, the same pictures on the wall, but the story inside it had changed, and it would not go back. I could not pretend anymore that the jokes were harmless or that the pills were just kindness. Nadia and Leo had used my sleep as cover to step into my accounts, my papers, my future. They were already planning what to do with my house, my money, my body, and even my reputation if I dared to resist. All of it had been done while I lay there, breathing like a stone, believing I was safe. I thought of Karim on his balcony, of his calm suggestion to look at numbers and not just feelings. I thought of Dr. Pavel's face when he said he had never changed my dosage, of the note he had written about my clear state. I thought of all the years I had worked in dark stairwells so my family could stand in the light. A kind of cold clarity settled over me. I understood now that whatever I did next had to be careful, quiet, and based on facts, not rage. As if to underline that thought, my phone buzzed in my hand. For a moment I panicked, thinking I had somehow started the video again, but when I looked at the screen, I saw a new notification, arriving in real time, a bank alert about recent activity on my account. The exact same soft chime I had heard in the recording the night before now rang out in my silent bedroom, overlapping in my mind with Leo's voice from the video as he confirmed another transfer I had never approved. The bank alert on my screen snapped me back into the present like a slap. For a second, I thought it was another entry from the night before, but the timestamp was current, the little line of text fresh and bright. It said there had been recent activity on my account. My fingers moved before my thoughts did. I tapped it open and saw a small transfer, not huge, but not tiny either, moving from my main account to the same destination that had appeared in the video. The description was vague, something like internal transfer, but I knew now exactly what it meant. It was proof that what I had watched was not some old event. They were still at it, even now, even after that night. I took screenshots of everything, the alert, the transaction, the time. I saved them in a special folder on my phone, then copied them to my old laptop. I made a copy of the video too, then another one, storing them in different places. My hands shook at first, but the more I worked, the calmer I became. It felt like wiring a complex panel. You do not argue with the current. You respect it, organize it, and guide it where it will not burn the house down. This time, the house I was saving was my own life. When I finally stepped out of the bedroom, the apartment seemed brighter than before, almost too bright. People often say that when you see the truth, you feel lighter. That was not my experience. I felt heavier, but it was a different kind of weight, like a tool belt full of the right instruments. I knew now that I could not pretend this was all in my head. I also knew I could not handle it alone. I called Karim and asked if he had time for another tea. He said he could be home in 20 minutes and sounded more serious than usual, as if he heard something in my voice. I turned off the lights, locked the apartment, and walked slowly to his building. The stairs felt steeper than I remembered, but I climbed them anyway, one step at a time, like I had done all my life. On the balcony, the air was cool. Karim set 2 glasses of tea on the old table and waited. I did not waste time. I took out my phone, opened the video, and asked him to listen with me. He watched the screen, eyes narrowed, saying nothing as Nadia and Leo moved through the rooms, used my phone, counted my money, and discussed my future like a project plan. Twice he asked me to pause so he could hear a phrase again. When it ended, he leaned back and rubbed his hand over his face, like a man who has just been told a bad diagnosis. He said this was not just normal family selfishness. He said this was planned, calculated, and that they were clearly using my trust and sleep to restructure my life around their needs. He asked if I had already spoken to the doctor and the bank. I told him about my visit to Dr. Pavel, about the note, about the new alert that had come while I was watching the recording. He nodded slowly. Then he said something simple, that if I did nothing, the plan I had just watched would soon become a reality. I would wake up one day, protected by their documents and stories, and it would be too late to argue. I asked him what he thought I should do. He did not push me toward anything dramatic. He said that in money matters, shouting is useless and proof is gold. He suggested two things. First, I should speak to a lawyer, someone who handles family and property issues, and show them the video. Second, I should go to the bank in person, explain that I was worried about unauthorized use, and lock down anything that could be changed without my clear, sober consent. He offered the name of a lawyer his cousin had used during a complicated inheritance case. Her name was Ms. Novak. He said she was firm, quiet, and did not get lost in drama. I went home with her name written on a folded piece of paper in my pocket. In the hallway, I heard Nadia moving in the kitchen and Leo laughing at something on his phone. My first instinct was to confront them right there, to hold the phone up and demand answers. But I knew how that would go. They would say I misunderstood, that it was jokes taken out of context, that I was paranoid, that the pills were affecting my memory. Maybe they would cry, maybe they would shout, and in the chaos, the one thing that truly mattered, the cold, clear structure of what they had done, might get lost. Instead, I acted normal. I hung up my jacket, washed my hands, kissed Nadia on the cheek, and asked what she was cooking. She said something about a cheap stew and rolled her eyes at the cost of meat. Leo complained that the internet had been slow all afternoon and that he could not work on his ideas. I ate, nodded, and answered in short sentences. All the while, my mind was somewhere else, counting down to the next day. The following morning, I called the number Kareem had given me from a quiet corner near my work site. When a calm female voice answered and introduced herself as Ms. Novak, I told her I needed advice about family and property and that I had something important to show her. She asked a few basic questions, then offered an appointment the next day. I agreed. My voice sounded steady, even though my heart was beating fast. Before seeing her, I made sure my evidence was easy to show. I copied the video and key screenshots onto a small USB drive and a cloud folder. I printed a short list of the most worrying transactions from my account with dates and times. I also slipped Dr. Pavel's note about my mental clarity and medication into the same envelope. It felt strange to treat my own life as a file, but I understood why it was necessary. People trust papers more than stories. Mrs. Novak's office was on the third floor of an old building with a new sign. Inside, the waiting room was quiet, with simple chairs and a plant that was either dying or resting. When she called me in, she did not smile too much or too little. She invited me to sit and asked me to tell her, in simple terms, what brought me there. I started from the sleep problems, then the pills, then the jokes, then the video. She listened without interrupting, except to clarify names and dates. When I finished, I handed her the USB and watched as she played the recording on her own computer. She did not react with big expressions. Her eyebrows rose slightly at certain phrases, like when Nadia spoke about moving me somewhere quieter, or when Leo mentioned using a doctor's note to frame me as confused. When the video ended, she sat back and folded her hands. She said that what I had shown her looked like a clear attempt to misuse my accounts and prepare a story about my mental decline, possibly to justify changes in property or control. She said that this kind of situation was sadly not unique, but that my position was much stronger than many she had seen because I had both proof and time. I asked what she meant by time. She said that I was still legally fully competent, that I had a doctor's note describing me as such, and that no official changes to property or long-term rights seemed to have been made yet. She said that, if we moved carefully, we could close most of the doors they were planning to use. She outlined a general approach, securing my accounts, documenting my wishes about the house and pension, and preparing, if needed, for separation or other steps. She did not go into technical details, and I did not ask. I just needed to know that there was a path that did not involve shouting in the kitchen. She asked if I was prepared emotionally for the idea that my relationship with Nadia and Leo might change completely once I acted. I said that, in my heart, it had already changed when I watched that video. I did not want revenge in the form of police cars or newspapers. I wanted safety, dignity, and the chance to live the rest of my days without being managed like a broken device. She nodded and said that was a reasonable goal. From there, we spoke about practical steps. She suggested I visit my bank the same day, explain that I suspected unauthorized access, and change anything that could be changed: passwords, cards, online permissions. She offered to draft a simple note stating that any future changes to my accounts or property should be treated with caution if presented without me physically present. She said we could also begin preparing documents that clarified what would happen to the house and funds if I chose to separate or if I later lost capacity. But she reminded me that I did not have to decide everything at once. Leaving her office, I felt tired, but strangely steady. On the way to the bank, I thought about Nadia's hand placing the pill in mine, about Leo's voice describing me as something to manage gently. For years, I had believed that protecting them meant never protecting myself. Now I saw that this belief had made me easy to use. At the bank, I asked to speak with the manager. Mr. Stein invited me to a small desk in a corner. He had the polite, neutral face of someone who has seen many financial stories. I told him I suspected my phone and accounts had been used at night without my clear consent. I did not show him the video, but I described the late-night activity and my heavy medication. He looked at the records on his screen, and after a while, nodded slowly. He said there had been several small transfers that did not fit my usual pattern. He said they could reset my digital access, issue a new card, and add a note that any major changes should require me to be present with identification. He asked gently if I felt safe in my current situation. I said I felt safe enough, with preparation. I did not mention Nadia and Leo by name. He did not ask. Institutions often care more about clear instructions than family drama. Before I left, he printed a simple summary of our conversation and gave it to me. I put it with the other papers in my folder, feeling the file grow thicker. That evening, I returned home and found Nadia in an unusually good mood. She said she had been thinking, and that maybe it was time we did something nice as a family. She suggested a dinner at a restaurant we sometimes passed but never entered, the one with a small back room you could reserve for events. She said we could invite Irina and a few relatives, maybe even Karim, and use the dinner to share good news about the future. Leo joined the conversation with energy I had not seen in him for months. He talked about announcing a new phase, about organizing responsibilities, and zero stress for me. He said that I would like what they had planned, and that this dinner could be a sort of celebration of my rest, a chance to show everyone that the family was aligned. Listening to him, I realized they still believed their plan was on track. They thought they were leading me, step by sleepy step, toward a point where I would hand them everything in front of witnesses who already saw me as fragile. I agreed to the dinner. I even smiled and said it sounded nice. Nadia looked relieved. Leo looked satisfied, as if a box on his invisible plan had been ticked. When Nadia booked the back room and sent confirmation details to the small family group chat, I pretended to barely notice. Later, when I was alone in the bedroom, I opened the chat again and carefully copied the reservation time and date into a message to Ms. Novak. I told her that there would be a family celebration and announcement that evening, and that I wanted to arrive with everything already in place. Her answer came back quickly. She said that by then, the key protections around my accounts and property would be ready, and that, if I wished, she and another quiet witness could be nearby, not at the table, but close enough. She reminded me that the goal was not a public fight, but a clear line. I put the phone down, lay back on the bed, and stared at the ceiling. For the first time in a long time, there was no pill waiting in my palm, only a date on the calendar that glowed in my mind like a small, steady light at the end of a long corridor. The night before the dinner, I watched the video one last time, not to torture myself, but to remind myself why I was doing this. I paid attention to their words, their priorities, the way they spoke about me when they thought I was gone. Then I closed the file, shut off the screen, and went to the kitchen. When Nadia asked if I wanted my pill, I told her the doctor and I had agreed I would stop for now. She frowned but said nothing more. Leo raised his eyebrows and then shrugged. I went to bed with a clear head and a heart that felt like a tight fist slowly opening. In the morning, when I put on my best shirt and folded the folder of quiet facts into my bag, I was not going to the restaurant as a sleepy wallet. I was going as a man who had finally decided to stay awake. The restaurant's back room smelled like roasted meat and cheap perfume when we arrived. Long tables were pushed together under a low ceiling, with a few fake plants in the corners to make it look fancier than it was. A banner with some generic congratulations message hung crooked on the back wall. Nadia fussed over the plates and napkins as if we were hosting important guests. Leo checked his phone every few seconds, his knee bouncing under the table. Irina arrived loud and smiling, kissing Nadia on both cheeks and telling her how brave she was for handling everything with such a sleepy husband. Relatives filtered in, taking seats, ordering drinks, asking the usual questions about work and health. Karim slipped in quietly and took a chair near the corner, close enough to see everything but far enough to be ignored by people who did not know him well. Nobody paid attention when a thin woman in a dark suit walked through the main hall outside and took a seat at a small table near the door. That was Ms. Novak. We had agreed she would stay in the background unless needed. Just knowing she was there made my shoulders drop a little. When most people had arrived, Nadia stood and tapped her glass with a fork. She thanked everyone for coming, said it meant a lot to have family together. She spoke about how life had been stressful, how I had been struggling with sleep and nerves, and how Leo had stepped up to help more with responsibilities. She painted a picture of a tired but grateful husband and a strong younger generation taking charge. People nodded. It sounded nice if you did not know the details. Then Leo stood up. He thanked Nadia for her support and said that tonight was about sharing good news and making sure everyone understood the plan. He said that I had worked hard all my life and that soon I would be able to fully relax while they handled the heavy things. He mentioned that some changes were being prepared with banks and maybe later with papers, all to protect me. As he spoke, Irina looked around proudly, as if she had personally designed this story. A few relatives smiled at me with a mixture of pity and admiration, as if I were already half retired from reality. I let him talk for a few minutes. I let him use words like safety, structure, and peace. I watched his hands move, shaping an invisible future where I was quiet and grateful, and he was in charge. Then, when he reached for the folder he had brought and said he wanted to show everyone a simple outline of how things would look, I raised my hand. He paused, surprised. I asked if I could say a few words before he went into details. He hesitated, but did not want to look controlling in front of everyone, so he smiled and said, of course. I stood slowly. My knees complained, but my back stayed straight. I thanked everyone for coming. I said I was glad to see familiar faces and that it meant something to share a meal. Then I said that before we talked about the future, I thought it might be helpful for everyone to see a small part of our present. I took my phone from my pocket and held it up. The room shifted a little. Nadia frowned, confused. Leo's eyes narrowed in a way I had seen before when something did not go according to his script. I walked to the small television mounted in the corner of the room, the one the restaurant used to show football matches during regular nights. I asked the waiter if he could connect my phone to it. He shrugged, used a cable from under the counter, and pressed a few buttons on the remote. A moment later, the TV showed the blank screen of my phone, then the gallery icon. I opened the long video and selected a short segment, the part where Nadia and Leo checked that I was under, used my hand to unlock my phone, and talked about my accounts and moving me somewhere quieter. I told the room that what they were about to see was from a night when everyone thought I was deeply asleep. Then I pressed play. Silence fell fast. On the screen, my dark bedroom appeared, then Nadia's silhouette leaning over my recorded body, whispering that the pill had worked and that tonight would be easy. Leo came into view, saying that I always dropped quickly now and that they did not have to wait long. People around the table shifted in their seats. Irina's smile faded a little. They watched as Leo lifted my limp hand and used it to unlock my phone. They heard the banking app chime. They heard Nadia call my caution useless and talk about money being wasted on safety. They listened as Leo read out balances and described how they could use my accounts and later, the house to fund a better life for themselves. They heard Nadia speak calmly about asking a doctor to describe me as confused if I resisted, about moving me to a smaller place and turning my bedroom into a workspace. Nobody made a sound. The clink of cutlery stopped. Even the waiters in the doorway froze. On the screen, Nadia's recorded laugh rang out when she said they just had to keep me sedated and trusting, and everything would be easier. Then the video reached the part where she tucked the blanket around me and called me their big sleepy wallet. And Leo agreed that once this phase was over, they would finally be free. When that line sounded in the restaurant, I saw several relatives look down at their plates, ashamed on someone else's behalf. When the clip ended, I paused it on the frame of my own sleeping face. The room felt heavier than before, but for the first time that evening, the weight was not on my shoulders alone. I turned back to the table. Nadia's face was pale, her mouth slightly open. Leo's jaw was tight. Irina stared at the TV, then at them, then at me, like she was trying to decide which reality to accept. I did not raise my voice. I said that for months, my sleep had been treated not as a blessing, but as an opportunity. I said that my trust had been used to open my accounts, my hand used to unlock my phone, and my age used as the beginning of a story they planned to tell others about my mind. I said that I had spoken to my doctor, my bank, and a lawyer, and that all of them now knew I was fully capable of making decisions and that any attempt to speak for me without my presence would be treated as what it was. Leo started to say that this was taken out of context, that they were just brainstorming, that everyone joked differently in private. His words stumbled over each other. Nadia said she had been worried about my health and that this was a misunderstanding. I held up my hand and said that I was not there to argue feelings. I was there to explain boundaries. I told the room that I had already changed my accounts, removed any online access, and asked the bank to reject any new arrangements not signed by me in person while fully awake. I said that I had also begun steps to protect the house so that it could not be moved or shared without my clear, sober consent. I did not describe legal articles. I just said that the necessary papers were filed and that any attempt to use my supposed confusion as a reason to act for me would meet a wall of facts. Then I looked at Nadia and said that I would be moving out for a while, that I needed distance from people who saw my sleep as a tool. I told Leo that I would no longer fund his projects or deposits, that if he wanted a life beyond our small apartment, he would build it with his own hands, not with stolen fingerprints and quiet transfers in the night. I said I would not call the police today, but that if any further attempts were made to access my money or change my status without me, I would not hesitate. Around the table, chairs creaked. Someone's fork fell against a plate with a sharp clang. Irina muttered something about not knowing it was like this. One of Nadia's cousins stared at her in open disbelief. Karim sat very still, watching, his eyes sad but proud. Near the door, I saw Ms. Novak stand up slowly, ready in case anyone challenged what I had just said. Nobody did. I placed my empty glass on the table. I thanked everyone again for coming and said that this was not the celebration they had expected, but it was the truth I needed to say while I was still strong enough to say it. Then I told Nadia and Leo that from this night on, my eyes would not be closed to anything that concerned my life, money, or name. I said that if they wanted to be seen as adults, they would have to stop treating me like a sedated obstacle. Without waiting for answers, I picked up my coat from the back of the chair, nodded to Karim, and walked toward the door. As I stepped out into the corridor, I heard Nadia call my name, her voice high and breaking, and Leo say something about explaining, about fixing this. Behind their words, I heard the low buzz of relatives starting to ask their own questions, voices rising in confusion and judgment. I did not turn back. I pushed the restaurant door open and stepped into the cool night air, feeling for the first time in a long while, completely and deliberately awake.